Hi, everyone, and welcome to Mindful Mondays. Today, we're going to be talking about our youth and really everything that they've been through during this time of the COVID crisis, and more importantly than that, how to help them get through this time and look forward to the next school year with a sense of empowerment. And so, the term that I want you to really learn and focus on today is the term self-agency. And so tune in and pay attention to what that is and how you can bring that to use. So whether you are a youth pastor, whether you're a parent, an educator, a neighbor, a friend, learn what that is, and let's learn ways together that we can help build that sense of self-agency into our youth. Glad you're here today. Hi, and welcome to Mindful Mondays. My name is Cheryl Clem, and I'm so glad you're with us here today. Today, we're going to be talking to teens and to parents. You know, I think there's a lot of anticipation about what school is going to look like in the fall. And so today we're going to be talking about how do we lead our kids? How do we empower our kids? How do we help them to move through that? And I'm here today with Dr. Adam Shepard. Hi, Adam.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here with me. Adam is a dean of students at a local Christian high school and has spent 20 years with just a heart and passion for students and for student leadership, and has the experience and heart and expertise to kind of help all of us go through this. And so, Adam, one of the things that I wanted to kind of use to start our conversation here today is really the framework to understand that students have been through a lot. And some students lost graduation. They worked for 12 years, wanted to walk and hear their name announced, and they didn't get to do that. And the world just kind of came to a standstill. Kids had to flip everything. Educators had to flip everything and go online, and isolation and things cut off, and no prom, and separated from friends. And so there's some real stuff that our kids have been through, and now shift gears, they're looking toward the fall, wondering and hearing all this talk about what is this going to look like. So could you start by telling us, maybe just give us a picture, help parents understand from an educator's point of view, what students said? What have you heard from parents, and what has it been like for educators?
Absolutely. So we actually ended up, like everybody else, went fully online March 16th. So that was a Monday, and then the week prior to that, it was, I think, Wednesday is when they started shutting down the March Madness tournament. And we started hearing all of the different news of things that were just shutting down. And so that Thursday and Friday, before we fully went online, we hadn't really figured out exactly what that was going to look like. And on the hour, by the hours, things were changing. Students were asking us, what's happening? What are we going to do? How long is this going to last? And so as we looked to possibly going online, kind of really trying to be honest and open with the students during that process, as to really recognizing that they did have those fears, they did have those concerns, especially our seniors, as they were anticipating, okay, well, is this going to be a couple of weeks? Is this going to be the remainder of the school year? There's a lot of uncertainty during that time. And even as the adults, we had a lot of uncertainty. And the piece that just keeps coming to mind for me, and so we have a little daughter who loves Frozen, loves the Frozen movies. In Frozen 2, for those of you that haven't seen it, there's so Olaf, the little snowman.
He's my favorite.
He's a lot of people's favorites. He's my daughter's favorite as well. And so he starts singing a song that says, "This will all make sense when I'm older." And so going through this process of transitioning through the mist in Frozen 2, where they're trying to figure out, okay, well, what is in store for us? And kind of we've gone through that mist now as educators to say, we don't know what's on the other side. And so then as the students looking to us, well, you guys have it all figured out, you're adults. And so this is not something we've ever been exposed to before. And so trying to be honest with the conversation with the students of where they're at, really seeing that they do have that voice, that their concerns are being heard, but also trying to be honest and saying, hey, we're walking with you through this process together. And then it's not just, well, we'll figure it out when you're older, that the adults have it, but what can we do right now? How do we want to respond? And so for us as a campus, we did go online. We've utilized Zoom on an ongoing basis. For our seniors, we actually had front yard kind of pseudo graduation where it was individualized. Faculty visiting each student to present gifts. We are hopeful that we could potentially even have the whole graduation service later at the end of the summer. It's again in hopes that we could potentially reopen as these restrictions are being eased, but for just to recognize those seniors, to have a little bit of that rite of passage that was taken away from them, trying to bring that to the students. And so that's one of the things that we've seen through this process.
Yeah. So Adam, as you did that, was there any particular like reaction or, story that stands out to you as a moment when you as the faculty did that?
Sure. So it was interesting in that we had students and families that just in the midst of still having their own caution decided not to participate. They chose not to have the faculty come to their house, and it was an option. We totally said we want to respect that. We want to honor the safety, and we want to provide that space that if that's not something that's comfortable to you, totally want to recognize that. But if this is something that you do want for your student, to be able to welcome that. And we've had stories of even, because these were outside in front yards, neighbors coming out and cheering and applauding along the side, and really trying to kind of wrap around that student to show that the community is there with them. Not only our community as a campus, but also just in general, like recognizing the space that we're in. And so really having that moment. And that's unfortunate for students in particular, seniors or even middle school students, or just as we go through high school, it's all about transition and about kind of those rites of passage, like you mentioned, prom, just those things that may seem inconsequential as an adult, but for a child in the moment, those are the defining moments of their high school career, their middle school career, that really do, when they are removed, make it very difficult to understand kind of where they're at in their own story of development of their own.
Yeah, well, and it really honors those milestones. Like we all need that in the middle of a long journey and hard work. It's kind of like running a marathon, right? When you have people alongside you cheering you on, and you feel that encouragement and that energy, and you celebrate that milestone, it's really valuable. And so it's like you said, it's the honoring and the celebration of the achievement and that rite of passage. And so parents and educators need to continue to help kids through that and to honor and celebrate in a way that's meaningful for them, right? Yeah.
Right. And so the other piece that I've had to remind myself of now I've gone through my own adulthood, now working with teenagers that are half my age, if not even younger, to the time it has a different conception for adolescence. And so it's a very abstract concept for students to understand how time progresses. And for a 15-year-old is essentially 1/15th. But then for a 30-year-old, it's 1/30th, which is half of 1/15. So it's twice as long perspective from a student, that the time takes that much longer. But when you're an adult, it takes that much less time. And so this same 365 days is the year, but in terms of what the experience for that student is, it's a longer proportion of experience. And that's why it has a longer impact on that kid's immediate perspective versus when they're older and they have more years, it's less of that proportion.
Yeah, so this feels long to them, and we need to remember that as we look through their eyes. One of the things when that I was thinking about when I knew we were going to talk today, I kind of boiled it down to three things that made sense to me that I think are important for teens. And one is empathy and being able to look through their eyes and really not just, give trite comments like, just this is the way it is, we'll get through this, it really understanding what this feels like to them. And so what I hear you saying is this feels long. Stretches out to them. And so that empathy, being able to not only hear them and see them, but being able to communicate that back to them, right? But the other thing I thought about was not just empathy or understanding what they've been through, but that encouragement and empowerment. So how do we help teams make this shift from this time that they've been through, that was a season of loss, and it's been hard and it felt long. And we don't just want to say, oh, this will all make sense when you're older. But how do we make that shift? How do we empower kids to know that as they look toward the future, as they look toward fall, how can we give them, and I know one of the areas of passion for you, Adam, is student leadership, and just this whole idea of leadership and being intentional. So what leadership advice do you have to students to help, and parents really, how do parents lead through this? How do students lead themselves and others through this time? How can they feel good about this?
Yeah, so there's a concept called agency or youth agency, and it's essentially the extent to which they own their own story, they own their own process of their own development. And so the extent to which a student exercises agency is to advocate for themselves, to kind of look at and kind of be reflective of what skills they do have that they can then contribute to their community. Those are the process of truly starting to live into their own identity as a leader. And so as adults coming alongside, it's really truly kind of helping the student and being that reflection back to, here's what I see in you and how you could potentially use that. And then asking them, okay, you're really interested in the creative arts. How can we use that to make an impact in our community? You've been exploring baking. Everybody's been exploring baking right now. And so how could we use that to give back to our communities, and what can you do? And so a lot of times the narrative gets into what we can't do. And we get caught up into what's been taken away and what we've lost and how we can't do things that we want to do. Well, we have the opportunity to do what we can. And so really kind of framing that, UCLA guy, Coach John Wooden used to say, don't let what you can't do get in the way with what you can do. And so
right,
kind of challenging the students to have that for themselves, to walk alongside them in that process.
Yeah, and you bring up such an important point that I hear students talk about, even at our church and in youth group and in therapy too. I've worked with a lot of teens, and it's this idea that resonates with them when people, particularly people who have meaning for them, like their parents or a coach or a dean or a neighbor. But this idea that we call out in them something we see in them, and that action brings about what you define, and also in the psychological world that we call this sense of agency or this sense of self. And so that is so important. So how can parents, neighbors, friends, aunts, uncles, how can we call these things out in students?
Yeah, so John Dewey, who was a psychologist and educational philosopher around the 20th century, so late 1800s, early 1900s, said that there's a conception that, well, experience is the greatest teacher. Well, learning doesn't happen through experience. It happens through reflection on the experience. And so really asking questions of our students of, as they go through this process, and not just, well, you've gained some resilience through this. Well, you've gained through your ability to have connection through technology, but really asking the students to reflect on their own experience. And sometimes they struggle. And I come across juniors and seniors that I ask them, so what do you think about this? I don't know. You tell me what I should think about this. Well, we're in this process of transitioning to you owning your own story and you owning your own, and becoming the person that God has created you to be, to then say, here's what I'm seeing. I just want, how do you see that for yourself? And so that's where really, and for me, as a dean of students, a lot of times I'm viewed more of like, well, you're the disciplinarian. You're the one that's coming in and talking to us when we've screwed up or when we've done something wrong. And so for me, yes, there are times that students make poor decisions. We got to walk through that. We got to walk through what those consequences are, but ultimately really trying to do that with the student. And so there's a concept where you look at it kind of if I may, I'm going to draw a little XY chart.
Wonderful. I love
so
charts.
If we have, so if we have on one end support and the other controller structure, and then we look at, so if we have, see if you can see that. So on our X we have increasing support, and on the Y we have increasing structure from low to high. And so we have in this quadrant here that we have no support, no structure. It's just kind of neglectful. There's nothing going on here. If you're watching this, that you're not part of that conversation. But here we have high levels of support without structure. We're doing things for our students. It's more permissive. And so this is where we're doing things for them and trying to kind of clear the path to remove all of those barriers that might be in their way. But if we have high structure where we're choosing the things that we're going to do with our students, but we're not giving them the support, we're doing it to our students. And so that's where we're making those decisions. We as the adults say, this is the way it's going to be. We're going to provide that structure for you. But ultimately where we want to get to is that high structure. We have some high expectations. We have high support. And so we're doing things with them.
Right.
So providing that structure, providing that context, providing this, because we are the ones that have a little bit more experience. We can speak to that, but also providing that space of the support for the students to take on their own process of that. And so really, if anything, and it's just doing it with. So the word with comes into mind. And so you can do things with the students, with your students.
Yeah, that's such a great takeaway. And really those words are so simple. You know, don't have something that we do where when we deliver the information, this is what we're doing to you. Don't try to rescue. This is what we're going to do for you, but with. And that takes extra time, extra intention, and extra patience, right?
It's messy. It takes a little bit of time. But ultimately, it will be in that process of that student really, truly starting to come on with their own understanding of what they can look like.
Yeah, yeah. And it's asking, you know, going back to something you said earlier, Adam, that I think is so important, which is asking the question, not just in the context of what's going on in the broader world, like, oh, what has this been like for you? But a very specific question about what meaning it has. And causing those deeper questions and reflecting the reflection part that you talked about. You know, there's a tool that I learned many years ago. I actually learned it in business, which is to really get to the root of something or the meaning of something. You really need to ask the word why 5 times. And so with each layer, it peels back a little bit about, oh, well, why did you feel that way? Oh, well, why do you think that happened? Well, why? And then you eventually get to it. But again, that takes dialogue, right? And patience with teens and the resistance that sometimes they don't want to go there. Right?
Yes, especially now. And also just being vulnerable as the adult. I don't have it all figured out. And sometimes a student may ask me a question that I don't know the answer to. You know what? I don't know. Let's find out together.
Yeah.
And and creating that space to say that the adults don't have it all figured out. Olaf is not right. You don't figure it all out when you become an adult. That really is this process of constant reflection on your process of where you're at that does lead to that wisdom. That, I mean, our students are developing wisdom right now. So really kind of trying to speak back into what we see from them, that this will then continue throughout their lifetime, not just in this moment.
Yeah, and you're bringing up a reminder to me that I have a list of questions that someone gave to me. It's like 100 great questions to ask, and I'll post that as a resource for parents because I think it's really helpful just to have things prompt us to ask those better questions and to do things with students and not try to solve it for them or not just jump over it or dismiss it. And so it is, like you talked about, it is something that builds in that teen this sense of self-agency. Like once they go through that process, and if you can hang with them through the awkwardness or the I don't want to talk about that or I don't know, to where you really try to set a stage where you can have those deeper conversations and kind of be authentic with them and do it with them. But it gives you kind of a format to follow. Yeah. So Adam, what our time with these is so short, but you've brought up just some great points about empowering teens, not doing it to them, not doing things for them, but doing things with them, asking good questions, being in it together, not pretending like you have all of the answers. And so what would be maybe if you were talking to a student right now, a teen right now, and again, they've been through this thing with COVID and life change and now they're looking towards school and fall and they are trying to find meaning in all of this. What would you say to a student? What's your best one or two pieces of advice as they look forward to getting through summer, re-engaging back in the fall?
Um, One of the things that I've told students that yes, this sucks. That just recognizing that in this moment, this does hurt. There's a lot of just hurt that has come from this and a sense of loss, and really owning that is okay. That I don't want to minimize that they feel this sense of loss, that they feel that this, when is this going to end? It's never going to end. Well, this moment sucks, and I get that. Here's where we are going. And I'm so excited that we're going to be together on campus. And if that's not the case, we're going to reach out. We're going to use the technology to connect, because ultimately I want to know who you are and the voice that you have to give. Because that's where, for me at least, especially through middle school and high school, it's that development of that student voice and really owning their own identity. And so that you have something to contribute to this world. And we're alongside you in that process until we find out what that is.
Yeah. And so what then also in closing would you say to parents to be able to be a part of instilling that in their children?
Just again, as a reminder that the time is different for you versus your child. And so what may be seeming a shorter period of time is a longer period of time for them. And so to really kind of walk through them, and it may even be just a little bit longer. Especially as there's still question as to whether or not we'll be able to reopen and have those face-to-face conversations. That in those moments, this is going to feel long, but in the immediacy of the day, you have the opportunity to respond to that moment for that child.
Yeah. And to be their advocate, right? And it's hard sometimes for parents because we're in this too, and we get frustrated and are fearful, about, is my child going to have to wear a mask? Or are they going to have these, strange plastic things around desks? Like what visually is this going to look like? But something, going back to what you said earlier, and that quote from John Wooden, from Coach Wooden, not to focus on those things that we can't, but to empower and focus on the things that we can change and that we can influence, and not to let our frustration, confusion spill over onto our child. Yeah, yeah. Well, Adam, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really happy to do a segment for parents and for teens. It is such a critical time of life, and to be able to speak into the life of students right now is really important to us. So thank you for your time. So glad you were here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And to those of you watching today, we'll provide, as we always do on our email, some resource links. I'll put that list of questions. We have a couple of great articles for you. And I have a book recommendation for parents of teens as well. And so thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week.